Most of us spend a surprising amount of time wondering what comes next. Where are we going? Are we moving quickly enough? Did we choose the right path? And somewhere beneath all of those questions is another one we rarely say out loud. What if I don't know? We have learned to treat uncertainty as something temporary, a gap that needs to be filled, a problem waiting for an answer. But stand somewhere high enough, looking across a valley like this, and uncertainty begins to look different. The mountains stretch into the distance, one behind another, some clear, some softened by the atmosphere, some disappearing almost completely into the horizon. We can see far, but we cannot see everything. And somehow that doesn't make the landscape feel incomplete. We don't look toward the distant mountains and become frustrated because we cannot see what lies behind them. We simply accept that there is more land, more sky, more places hidden beyond the edge of what is visible. Perhaps we could look at our own lives that way. There are parts of the future we cannot see from here, not because we have failed to plan carefully enough, not because we missed some important sign, simply because we haven't reached them yet. And maybe we aren't supposed to see them, not yet. The mountains seem to understand something about distance. They do not reveal themselves all at once. A path disappears behind the trees. A valley bends out of sight. A ridge hides whatever comes after it. You could stand here for hours and still not know exactly where every trail leads. But the landscape does not seem anxious about that. Nothing is rushing to explain itself. The trees simply grow. The clouds move. Snow rests on the highest peaks. Light travels slowly across the slopes. Everything is changing, but almost nothing appears hurried. There is movement without urgency. Maybe that is what we forget. We often believe that moving forward should feel obvious, that progress should look like progress. A new job, a new place, a decision, an achievement. Something we can point toward and say, there, I am going somewhere. But some movement happens quietly. A thought changes. Something we once wanted begins to matter less. An old expectation starts loosening its grip. We become more comfortable saying no, or more willing to say yes. We stop needing an answer that once consumed us. None of these things make much noise. There may be no moment when we realize they are happening, and still, we are moving. Perhaps some of the most important distances we travel cannot be measured in miles. Look at the mountains again. From here they seem still, completely still, but they are changing too. Wind touches their surface. Water moves through cracks in the stone. Snow melts. Trees grow and fall. Seasons leave their marks. Time is working everywhere, slowly enough that we mistake it for stillness. Maybe there are seasons in our lives like that. Times when we believe nothing is happening because nothing dramatic is changing. We wake in the same place, carry the same questions, look toward the same uncertain future, and wonder why we are not further along. But perhaps something is changing beneath the surface. Perhaps we are becoming ready for something we could not have carried before. Perhaps we are learning what no longer belongs with us. Perhaps the path is forming before we can see it. There is a strange freedom in allowing that possibility, because it means we do not have to solve everything today. We do not need the entire map. We only need enough ground for the next step. And sometimes, perhaps, we do not even need that. Sometimes we can simply stop, not because we have given up, not because we are lost, but because there is nothing wrong with standing somewhere for a while, looking around, letting the world exist without immediately asking what it can become. The valley below does not need us to cross it. The mountains do not need us to climb them. The horizon does not need to become a destination. They can simply be what they are. And perhaps this moment can too. Not preparation for something else. Not another step toward a better future. Just this, a quiet place between what has already happened and whatever has not happened yet. Maybe we spend too much of life trying to escape that space. We call it waiting, being stuck, falling behind. But perhaps there is another name for it, being here. The clouds continue across the sky. Their shadows move over the mountains and disappear into the valley. Nothing holds them. Nothing asks them to stay. And the mountains do not follow. They remain exactly where they are while the entire sky changes above them. There is something peaceful about that. The reminder that we do not have to chase every change. We do not have to turn every uncertainty into a decision. Maybe the hardest part of not knowing what comes next is believing that everyone else does. From a distance, other people's lives can look remarkably certain. They seem to know where they are going, what they want, what they are building toward. And when our own path feels unclear, it is easy to look at theirs and wonder whether we missed something. Perhaps everyone else received a map we somehow never found. But mountains look different from a distance too. From here, their lines seem clean. Their direction seems obvious. One ridge rises into another. One valley leads toward the next. It looks almost simple. Walk closer and everything changes. The smooth slopes become forests. The straight lines become rock. Paths divide. Some disappear completely. What looked obvious from far away becomes complicated the moment you are standing inside it. Perhaps lives are like that too. We see other people from a distance. We see the decision after it was made, the destination after they arrived, the confidence after the uncertainty. What we rarely see are all the moments before, the hesitation, the wrong turns, the evenings spent wondering whether any of it made sense. We see the mountain, not the climb, and then we compare their visible distance with our invisible uncertainty. No wonder we sometimes feel behind. But behind whom? The trees below are not competing with the mountains. The river does not compare its pace with the clouds. Nothing in this landscape appears concerned with arriving at the same place at the same time. Everything follows its own shape, its own conditions, its own rhythm. Maybe there is something freeing in that. There is no universal schedule for becoming who we are. No single age by which everything should make sense. No moment when uncertainty becomes evidence that we have failed. Some people find direction early. Others change direction many times. Some discover what matters to them only after spending years pursuing what doesn't. And some paths become visible only because another one ended. Perhaps that is not wasted time. Perhaps a path does not need to lead where we expected in order to have carried us somewhere important. Down in the valley, there are likely trails that end, roads that turn away from the mountains, streams that disappear beneath the trees. From here, none of that looks wrong. It is simply part of the landscape. But in our own lives, we are much less forgiving. We want every choice to prove itself, every effort to lead somewhere, every chapter to explain why it needed to happen. And when it doesn't, we call it wasted. But maybe life is not a straight road we are supposed to complete efficiently. Maybe some places are simply places we needed to stand for a while. Some people are part of the journey without being part of the destination. Some dreams teach us something even when we eventually leave them behind. Some directions matter precisely because they show us where we no longer want to go. The mountain does not judge the trail for turning. The trail turns because the land changes. Maybe we can too. Changing direction does not always mean the previous direction was a mistake. Sometimes we learn something. Sometimes circumstances change. Sometimes we change. And the path that once made sense simply doesn't anymore. There is no failure in noticing that. There may even be wisdom in it. The clouds above the valley have changed since we first looked at them. Some have moved beyond the mountains. Others have appeared from somewhere outside the frame. The sky does not try to preserve a particular arrangement. It allows one shape to become another. Perhaps we could allow ourselves the same freedom, to become uncertain, to reconsider, to outgrow something without needing to dislike who we were when we chose it. There is so much pressure to become someone consistent, to have a story that makes sense when told backward. But real lives are rarely that neat. We contradict ourselves. We begin again. We want things and then stop wanting them. We become people our younger selves could not have predicted. Maybe that is not confusion. Maybe that is movement. And perhaps the question is not always, where am I going? Maybe sometimes the better question is, what feels true from where I am now? Not forever. Not for the next 10 years. Just now. What deserves our attention? What feels heavy because we have carried it too long? What feels quiet but somehow right? Those questions may not give us a destination, but perhaps they give us something more useful, a direction. The mountains in the distance do not need to become clearer yet. We can walk without knowing everything beyond them. We can change direction when the land changes. We can stop when we need to. And we can trust that a path does not have to look like anyone else's to be real. There comes a point when looking ahead becomes exhausting, not because the future is frightening, but because we have spent so much time trying to see something that has not arrived yet. We imagine conversations, decisions, different versions of what might happen. We prepare ourselves for roads we may never walk. And while the mind travels far ahead, the body remains here, in this moment, under this sky. Perhaps the mountains understand something we forget. They never look beyond themselves. They do not wonder what tomorrow's weather will bring. They meet whatever arrives: sunlight, rain, snow, wind. Nothing is prepared for. Nothing is resisted before it exists. There is only the season that is here now. Maybe that is why the landscape feels so peaceful. It carries no imaginary future, only what is actually happening. The clouds move slowly across the valley. Somewhere in the distance, sunlight reaches one of the slopes. Another remains in shadow. Neither condition lasts. The light moves, the shadow follows, and the mountain remains beneath both. Perhaps we spend too much time trying to arrange our lives so that only the light remains. We want certainty before taking a step, confidence before making a decision, proof that something will work before allowing ourselves to begin. But life rarely offers those guarantees. Most meaningful things begin without them. A new direction, a relationship, a difficult conversation, a decision to leave something behind. We step forward without knowing exactly where the ground will lead, and only afterward do we understand what that step became. Maybe courage is not knowing the path. Maybe courage is moving gently without needing to. There are trails through these mountains that cannot be seen from here. They exist beneath the trees, around the cliffs, across valleys hidden behind the nearest ridge. Someone walking those trails sees far less than we do from this viewpoint. Their world may be only a few meters of ground ahead, and still they can continue. One step reveals another, then another. Perhaps that is enough. We often want life to show us the entire route before we agree to trust it. But perhaps life has always worked differently. The next piece becomes visible when we reach it, not before. There is something almost comforting about that. It means we do not need tomorrow's answers today. We do not need to solve a future that has not happened. We only need to meet the ground beneath us. The wind moves through the trees below. From this distance, the forest appears still, but every branch is responding. Every leaf is moving. There is life inside what looks motionless. Perhaps there is movement inside us too, even during the seasons when we feel stuck. We are noticing, learning, reconsidering, letting go. Sometimes the change is so quiet that we only recognize it later. One day we realize something no longer hurts the way it once did. A fear no longer controls the same decisions. A dream we once chased no longer feels necessary. Nothing dramatic happened. We simply moved, slowly. Perhaps that is why we should be careful when we tell ourselves that nothing is changing. We may simply be standing too close to see it. The mountains look permanent from here, but they are changing every day. Rain shapes the stone. Snow feeds the rivers. Roots push through the earth. Time moves through everything. Nothing needs to hurry, and neither do we. There will always be another horizon. Even if we reach the mountains in the distance, something else will appear beyond them. Another valley, another question, another direction we cannot yet see. Maybe the goal was never to reach a place where uncertainty disappears. Maybe the goal is to become comfortable enough with uncertainty that we no longer need it to disappear. To look toward the distance and say, I don't know what is there, and still feel calm. The clouds continue moving. The valley remains open beneath them. Somewhere beyond these mountains, life continues in ways we cannot see. And here, life continues too. No less meaningful because we do not know what comes next. No less complete because the path is hidden. Perhaps we can leave tomorrow beyond the mountains for now. It will arrive when it arrives, and when it does, we will meet it from wherever we are standing then. For now, there is only this piece of the path, this view, this breath, and perhaps that is all we were ever meant to see at once. Eventually, every path disappears from view, not because it ends, but because distance has limits. There is always a point beyond which we cannot see. A bend in the road, a line of trees, a mountain standing between us and whatever comes next. Perhaps that is not a problem. Perhaps it is part of what makes a journey possible. If we could see every step before taking the first one, there would be nothing left to discover. No room for surprise, no reason to trust ourselves, only a route already known. The mountains in the distance remain quiet. They do not offer answers. They do not tell us which direction to choose. They simply remind us that something can be unknown without being frightening. There is still land beyond the horizon, still sky beyond the clouds, still life beyond what we can currently see. Maybe that is enough. We spend so much time searching for certainty because we believe it will bring peace. If we knew what would happen, perhaps we could finally relax. If we knew we were making the right decision, perhaps the doubt would disappear. If we knew where the path ended, perhaps walking it would become easier. But certainty has always been temporary. Even the best plan eventually meets something unexpected. Weather changes, people change, we change. The path turns, and suddenly we are standing somewhere we never planned to be. Maybe peace cannot depend on knowing. Maybe it has to come from something quieter. The willingness to meet whatever appears, the trust that we can change direction, the understanding that being uncertain does not mean being lost. Below, the valley stretches between the mountains. From here, it looks peaceful, but there are countless small movements happening inside it. Water flowing, branches bending, animals crossing unseen trails. Life continuing without needing anyone to understand where it is going. Nothing in the valley seems worried about reaching a final destination. Everything simply responds to what is here. Perhaps we can live a little more like that, not without plans, not without dreams, but without asking them to carry the weight of our peace. We can want something without needing to know exactly how it will happen. We can choose a direction without demanding that it remain the right direction forever. We can walk towards something and still allow ourselves to turn. The path is allowed to change because we are allowed to change. There is freedom in that. The clouds continue across the sky. Their shadows move over the mountains and disappear into the distance. For a moment, sunlight reaches the valley. Then it moves again. The landscape never tries to keep the perfect light. It receives what arrives and releases what leaves. Perhaps the future asks for the same thing. Not control, not prediction, only presence. To meet tomorrow when it becomes today. To meet the next step when it becomes visible. And until then, to stop demanding answers from a horizon that was never meant to give them. The mountains remain where they are. The valley remains open. The path ahead remains partly hidden. And somehow none of that feels unfinished anymore. There is simply more. More beyond what we can see. More beyond what we currently understand. More life waiting outside the edges of this moment. We will reach some of it. Other parts may never belong to us. That is all right. We do not need every road, only the one beneath our feet. Maybe one day we will look back from somewhere far beyond these mountains. The path that feels uncertain now may seem obvious then. We may understand why certain roads ended, why others appeared, why we had to wait before something became clear. Or perhaps we will never understand all of it. Maybe we do not need to. A life can be meaningful without becoming a perfectly explained story. The wind passes through the valley once more. The clouds continue moving. The mountains grow softer in the distance. Nothing asks us to follow. Nothing asks us to stay. For now, we can simply look, breathe, and allow the horizon to remain a horizon. There is no need to see beyond it yet. Whatever waits there will become visible when we are close enough. Until then, this moment is enough. This view is enough. This piece of the path is enough. And perhaps not knowing what comes next does not mean something is missing. Perhaps it simply means there is still somewhere left to go.